Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 1961.2.3, Operation Looking Glass. Few concepts capture the imagination quite like Project Looking Glass, a staple of modern conspiracy lore and internet deep dives. In these circles, Looking Glass is whispered about as a clandestine, ultra-secret initiative that allegedly utilized river-engineered extraterrestrial technology, often described as a device capable of peering into probable futures, scanning timelines, or witnessing historical events across spacetime. Yet, when you step out of the speculative echo chamber and look at the actual historical record, the truth is both far more grounded and deeply tied to the terrifying realities of the nuclear age. Operation Looking Glass officially took to the skies on February 3, 1961. The program was born out of the absolute paranoia of the early Cold War. By the late 1950s, Strategic Air Command, SAC, realized a terrifying vulnerability. If the Soviet Union launched a surprise first strike, their underground command bunkers head off at Air Force Base in Nebraska could be instantly vaporized, leaving America's nuclear arsenal completely headless and unable to retaliate. To solve this, the Air Force modified Boeing KC-135 jet tankers into floating, nuclear-proof command posts. Beginning on that February morning in 1961, at least one of these planes, carrying an elite general and a full battle staff, was kept airborne 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. A continuous patrol that didn't stop for nearly 30 years until July 1990. So, while internet lore loves to imagine Looking Glass as a sci-fi portal peering into alternate timelines, the real project started as a very desperate, very real insurance policy to make sure America could still end the world if someone else started it first. Project Looking Glass, the ultimate Cold War conundrum. Decoding the Cold War code name. Declassified government documents and military histories reveal no evidence that a program by the name Looking Glass ever existed for temporal viewing or alien artifact manipulation. Instead, the moniker is almost certainly a linguistic conflation, a blending of real-world, classified hardware and Cold War paranoia. In actual military history, Looking Glass was the iconic call sign for the U.S. Strategic Air Command's SAC Airborne Command Post. Starting in February 1961, modified Boeing EG-135C aircraft, and later Navy EG-6B Mercury planes, were kept continuously airborne 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for nearly 3 decades. Why was it called Looking Glass? The name wasn't chosen because it gazed into alternate dimensions, it was chosen because of its function. The aircraft served as an exact mirror of the underground command and control center at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. If a Soviet first strike managed to obliterate Washington, D.C., and ground-based command centers, the general officer aboard the Looking Glass aircraft would instantly assume the authority of the National Command Authority. They carried the battle staff, the communication arrays, and the airborne launch control system, capable of ordering a retaliatory nuclear strike. They were literally the reflection of the government in the sky. How did a nuclear command aircraft transform into a time-viewing alien device in popular lore? The transition is a classic byproduct of deep state secrecy. When civilians or UFO researchers catch wind of heavily classified military projects carrying esoteric poetic code names like Looking Glass, Project Sign, or High Dive, the lack of public transparency creates a vacuum. In that vacuum, imagination takes over. People combine the genuine secrecy surrounding Cold War nuclear continuity programs with the folklore of crash saucer retrievals at places like Roswell, fusing a literal doomsday plane into a mythical time machine. Project Looking Glass remains a fascinating mirror of our own anxieties, a testament to a time when humanity built airplanes to survive the end of the world, while the public preferred to wonder if we were looking into the future instead. When it comes to real-world operational incidents associated with Project Looking Glass, the history isn't about sci-fi temporal anomalies or peering into alternate dimensions. It is about the harrowing, white-knuckle reality of keeping a nuclear command post airborne 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for nearly 3 decades. While the mission accumulated over 281,000 accident-free flying hours, running a continuous doomsday flight patrol during the height of the Cold War, had its share of high-stakes moments and near misses. For nearly 29 straight years, a looking-glass plane was constantly in the air. However, that unbroken chain came to a terrifyingly close shave on March 4, 1980. Due to a massive severe weather system bearing down on Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, the replacement looking-glass aircraft was physically unable to launch safely from the ice-choked runway. For a brief, heart-stopping window of time, the continuous airborne alert chain was nearly broken, forcing the military to scramble an alternating negative 4B Nightwatch aircraft to cover the gap at the absolute last second. Inside the cramped, electromagnetically hardened cabin of the EC-135C, the psychological pressure on the flight crew and general officers was immense. Because these personnel carried the codes, authentication materials, and authority to execute the single integrated operational plan, PSYOP, essentially ending civilization as we know it, security protocols were paranoid to the extreme. Historically, certain communication and operations officers aboard Looking Glass were required to wear sidearms, revolvers, on their hips while on duty. It wasn't just to guard against outside threats, but as a chilling internal safeguard against rogue crew members attempting to seize control of the doomsday communications array. The true incidents involving Looking Glass happened on the ground, mirroring moments when the world hovered millimeters away from nuclear annihilation. During major historical crises such as the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis or the 1973 Yom Kippur War, the Looking Glass aircraft weren't just flying their routine horseshoe orbits over the Midwest. Their battle staffs were locked at maximum readiness. General officers aboard the plane were briefed on real-time alerts, holding their breath to see if the underground command post at Offutt would go silent, meaning the general in the air had just inherited command of the American nuclear arsenal. Project Looking Glass didn't need time travel portals to be dramatic. Its history was written by the constant grinding hum of jet engines carrying the end of the world in a metal tube, flying day and night while the rest of the world slept completely unaware. The myth of the chronosphere. How ufology turned a doomsday plane into a time machine, while Strategic Air Command was busy flying Boeing EC-135s in endless circles to ensure civilization didn't accidentally vaporize itself during the Cold War. The darker, more speculative corners of the internet were building an entirely different kind of beast. In the realm of modern conspiracy lore and alternative ufology, Project Looking Glass is whispered about not as a winged command post for nuclear war, but as the holy grail of river-engineered extraterrestrial tech. A machine capable of peering into probable futures, scanning alternate timelines, and watching history unfold across the fabric of spacetime. Here is the deep dive into how the myth was born, how ufology imagines the device, and why the line between a real Cold War military hardware and sci-fi mythology completely blurred. If you listen to whistleblower testimony, anonymous internet forum threads, like the classic anonymous physicist or Camelot-style interviews, or deep internet lore, the fictional Project Looking Glass is described in breathless, almost mystical terms. According to these narratives, the device wasn't built with vacuum tubes and slide rules. It was river-engineered from crashed extraterrestrial hardware, frequently tied to the alleged 1947 Roswell debris or underground laboratories, like those at Los Alamos and Area 51. In UFO folklore, Looking Glass is usually described as a massive, rotating electromagnetic ring system or a hyperdense plasma column. The theory goes that the device generated intense, localized gravitational and magnetic fields capable of distorting space and time. By feeding massive amounts of electrical power into this chronosphere, operators could allegedly bend local spacetime, creating a viewing screen or holographic interface. Some variations of the myth claim and required human consciousness or psychic operators to tune the device to specific frequencies, acting as a navigational compass for navigating the multiverse of probable futures. Why would the military want a time-viewing device? The lore insists it was built for absolute, unchecked geopolitical dominance. Proponents of the myth claim that during the height of the Cold War, the Pentagon used Looking Glass to run simulations of nuclear conflict. By looking downstream into probable futures, they could see which diplomatic moves or military strikes would result in total annihilation versus victory. A recurring theme in the lore is that the operators eventually discovered a terrifying hard limit. Around the year 2012, or a generic shift point in the near future, all timelines began to converge into the total wall of static or absolute nothingness. Conspiracy theorists love this detail, claiming it was proof of an impending global cataclysm, a pole shift, or an evolutionary leap where human history as we know it simply stops. How did a real, highly classified nuclear command plane become an interdimensional time machine in the minds of UFO researchers? The answer lies in the peculiar psychology of government secrecy. During the Cold War, the Pentagon loved poetic, slightly ominous code names: Project Sign, Project Grudge, Operation High Jump, Looking Glass. To a civilian researcher, a name like Looking Glass sounds suspiciously mystical for a communications relay plane. It practically begs to be misinterpreted as a literal mirror into another dimension. When whistleblowers or researchers stumble across heavily redacted documents mentioning Looking Glass, the strict compartmentalization of the military-industrial complex means context is stripped away. If you find a reference to a secret underground facility working on Looking Glass alongside rumors of downed craft, your brain naturally connects the dots, turning a radio relay system into a time-viewing portal. Ufology has always harbored a deep yearning for the cosmic upgrade. Admitting that the government has a flying saucer in a hangar is cool, but claiming the government has a device that can shatter the laws of physics and let you watch ancient Rome or next week's stock market. That is the ultimate sci-fi fantasy come to life. The real Project Looking Glass was terrifying enough without needing time travel. It was a fleet of airplanes dedicated to managing the end of human civilization 24 hours a day, flying in secret while millions of people slept below. Yet, the fact that ufology transformed a nuclear doomsday plane into an interdimensional crystal ball says a lot about us. When faced with the terrifying, mundane reality of the Cold War, humanity preferred to imagine that our leaders were gazing into the future, rather than simply terrified that they wouldn't have a tomorrow. If you've ever found yourself in the deep, dark corners of a conspiracy forum or watching a high-stakes sci-fi thriller, you've likely stumbled upon the name Project Looking Glass. It is the ultimate Swiss Army knife of plot devices, a term so versatile that it can mean anything from a mystical spellbook experiment to a top-secret government webcam for peering into the next century. Depending on who you ask, it's either a fun narrative trope or the reason the government knows exactly what you're having for lunch next Tuesday. At its heart, Looking Glass is a tip of the hat to Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. In the world of science fiction, the mirror has always been a convenient shorthand for things that are definitely not normal. If a project is named after a mirror, you can bet your bottom dollar that someone is about to fall through it, talk to a ghost, or accidentally collapse the space-time continuum while trying to adjust the focus. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Project Looking Glass was the kind of headache-inducing scientific pursuit. Only a villain with too much tenure and a disregard for safety regulations could dream up. Using the Darkhold, essentially the ancient world's most cursed PDF, Hydra scientists attempted to synthesize biological life using quantum energy harvested from the dark dimension. It's a classic mad scientist mistake. You want to see if you can do it, so you ignore the fact that you're literally sucking power from an extra-dimensional void. What could possibly go wrong? In the burgeoning world of indie gaming, like the 2026 title Project Looking Glass, the trope has taken a delightfully gritty turn. Here, the Looking Glass isn't a sleek, futuristic interface. It's a chunky, beige, Cold War-era CRT monitor. There is something uniquely terrifying about the idea that your consciousness is being projected into the astral plane via a monitor that weighs 50 pounds and has a refresh rate that makes you want to cry. It's the perfect blend of we don't know how this works, and we probably shouldn't have turned it on. Across the wider sci-fi genre, Looking Glass has become the catch-all label for any piece of technology that allows for temporal sightseeing or vacationing in alternate dimensions. It is the narrative equivalent of a get-out-of-jail-free card. Need your hero to see the future? Point them at the Looking Glass. Need to explain how a character ended up in a timeline where everyone wears hats made of cheese? The Looking Glass did it. The enduring appeal of Project Looking Glass lies in our strange, perennial obsession with seeing what we aren't supposed to see. We have a fundamental human itch to peek behind the curtain of reality, and Project Looking Glass is the perfect vessel for that itch. Whether it's the high-concept drama of a blockbuster movie or the eerie, glitchy atmosphere of a psychological horror game, the trope succeeds because it bridges the gap between the mythic and the mechanical. It gives us a name for the unknown, a label for the impossible, and a reason to be suspicious of any piece of equipment that looks like it might be staring back at us. Ultimately, whether it's a terrifying Hydra experiment or a dusty monitor in a basement, Project Looking Glass serves as a reminder that we are inherently curious creatures. We are always looking for a better view of the future, even if that view comes at the cost of our sanity, our timeline, or our ability to trust a perfectly innocent piece of office furniture. If you think your browser history is embarrassing, consider the alleged classified archives of Project Looking Glass. In the cozy, caffeine-fueled corners of the internet, where reality is merely a suggestion, this project isn't just a fun sci-fi plot point. It is the holy grail of the government knows everything. According to conspiracy lore, the US military didn't just spend the Cold War building better tanks. They spent it building a giant plasma-fueled DVR that records the future. The premise is delightfully high concept. Project Looking Glass wasn't a search engine semicolon. It was a temporal engine. The lore suggests that military scientists, who apparently decided that traditional surveillance was too 20th century, developed technology utilizing counter-rotating mercury plasma or recovered off-world artifacts to peer into probable timelines. Think of it as the ultimate military utility. Why bother with diplomatic cables or covert spies when you can just turn a dial, peer into a swirling vat of mercury, and watch the political blunders of 2026 unfold in real time? It's the bureaucratic dream, the ability to foresee the future, provided you can decipher the fuzzy reception of a machine that looks suspiciously like a prop from a 1950s B-movie. Every good conspiracy needs a cast, and the Looking Glass myth finds its leading man in figures like Dan Burrish. The narrative goes something like this. Brave, deep-cover whistleblowers step forward to reveal that the government was using this looking glass technology to play chess with human history. In these tales, the US government isn't just reacting to world events, they're preempting them. They are anticipating elections, adjusting policy, and playing a geopolitical game of four-dimensional chess, all thanks to a machine that lets them see the punchline before the joke is even told. It's a comforting thought, in a way. It suggests that someone, somewhere, is steering the ship. Or, conversely, it's a horrifying thought, because it suggests the ship is being steered by people who think counter-rotating mercury plasma is a viable office expenditure. Perhaps the most dramatic chapter in the Looking Glass mythology involves the year 2012. You remember 2012, the year the Mayans allegedly predicted the end of the world, and we all settled for Gangnam Style instead. According to Looking Glass lore, the project's technicians spent years staring into their mercury bowls at a massive convergence point in 2012. And what did they see? Nothing good. The mythology claims the future was so catastrophically bleak, think fire, brimstone, and the total collapse of civilization, that the powers that be panicked. The story goes that they spent the better part of a decade frantically nudging timelines and diverting catastrophes, just to make sure we reach the end of 2012 with nothing more severe than a minor existential crisis. If you ever wondered why the world didn't end in December 2012, well, the conspiracy theorists have an answer. We didn't survive it. We just got a rewrite. Why does this story persist? Because it's the ultimate expression of our black box anxiety. We live in a world of complex, opaque systems, algorithms, global finance, and geopolitical maneuvers that no single human can fully comprehend. Project Looking Glass is just the physical manifestation of that anxiety. It's the idea that someone has a machine, some kind of glorious, mercury-filled mirror that explains why things happen the way they do. Whether or not the government is actually keeping a secret plasma watch on the timeline is frankly beside the point. The myth of Project Looking Glass survives because it is a perfect mirror of our own curiosity. It satisfies that deep, nagging suspicion that reality is much weirder than we've been told, and that if we just had the right equipment, we could finally see the ending before the movie is even over. If you thought your day job was stressful, try working for the Secret Space Program, SSP, a supposed shadow branch of the military-industrial complex that allegedly spends its time patrolling the solar system, brokering deals with extraterrestrial cartels, And, of course, keeping a watchful eye on the future via Project Looking Glass. If the conspiracy verse is to be believed, while NASA is busy sending rovers to Mars with all the excitement of a snail's pace road trip, the real space agency is already operating a fleet of craft that make the Enterprise look like a glorified kayak, all while using a high-tech crystal ball to make sure they don't accidentally get vaporized. The narrative of the secret space program suggests that sometime in the mid-20th century, the world superpowers decided that space was too important to leave to the public. While we were glued to our black and white TVs watching Apollo missions, the breakaway civilization was apparently busy building secret colonies on the moon, mining the asteroid belt, and developing propulsion systems that rely on things like element 115 inches or anti-gravity drives that would give an engineer a migraine. It's a grand dramatic theater of the absurd. We were playing with firecrackers and they were busy colonizing the local neighborhood. And like any good interstellar empire, the SSP needed a way to ensure their investment remained profitable. Enter Project Looking Glass. In the lore of the secret space program, Project Looking Glass isn't just a project, it's their galactic insurance policy. If the SSP is playing a high-stakes game of 4D chess with alien civilizations, Looking Glass is the ultimate cheat code. The story goes that this wasn't just a viewer for seeing what's for dinner at the White House in the year 2050. No, this was a temporal predictive interface. Imagine being able to see a probable future, realizing the outcome involves your secret space fleet being accidentally blown up by a stray asteroid, and then, oops, adjusting the timeline until you're the ones holding the high ground. It is the ultimate tool for a civilization that refuses to lose, utilizing what proponents describe as temporal manipulation to curate the timeline until it's as favorable as possible. This is where the wits meet the weird. Conspiracy lore claims that the SSP used Looking Glass to observe a massive, unavoidable convergence point in 2012. The data, they say, was so apocalyptic, showing a future so riddled with catastrophe that it nearly triggered a full-scale panic among the elite controllers of the program. The narrative claims that the powers that be spent years in a frenzy of temporal engineering, effectively playing the world's most dangerous version of The Sims, moving around geopolitical pieces and nudging the timeline just enough to bypass the game over screen. If you ever wondered why the world seemed a little off back then, well, the SSP conspiracy theorists would tell you it's because we were essentially living in a patched, beta-tested version of reality. Whether or not you believe the SSP is currently flying around in triangular craft while peeking into a vat of spinning mercury, the narrative is undeniably hypnotic. It gives us a reason for the chaos of modern history, a feeling that someone or something is behind the wheel. But there's a funny irony at the heart of this myth. We want to believe that there is a secret space agency with a machine that can see the future, because the alternative, that we're just winging it as a species, hoping for the best while dealing with planetary scale problems, is significantly more terrifying. In the end, Project Looking Glass serves as the ultimate sci-fi comfort blanket. It suggests that even if we're drifting through the cosmos and the equivalent of a galactic rowboat, there's an elite, shadow-funded captain somewhere else in the fleet, watching a monitor, trying to navigate us away from the icebergs. And honestly, knowing how we act at the buffet, they probably deserve a raise for keeping us on track. Whether it's a terrifying Hydra experiment in a blockbuster movie, or a suspiciously specific conspiracy theory involving Mercury and bad vibes, the concept of Project Looking Glass refuses to go away. It is the narrative equivalent of a moth to a flame situation, and honestly, can you blame us? We are a species that has spent its entire history staring into reflective surfaces, desperately hoping that if we squint hard enough, we might see something, or someone, looking back. At its core, the Looking Glass trope taps into the ancient, slightly creepy human fascination with mirrors. For centuries, we've treated them as more than just vanity stations. They are portals, gateways, and if folklore is to be believed, tools for amateur sorcery. When you label a classified military project Looking Glass, you're not just invoking sci-fi. You're invoking every ghost story you've ever heard about someone getting trapped in a reflection. It's the perfect metaphor. We don't just want to know the future. We want to walk through the screen and inhabit it before it even happens. Let's be honest. Project Looking Glass is also the perfect fictional black box for the 21st century nervous system. We live in an era where algorithms already seem to know what we're going to buy before we even feel the urge to shop, and where predictive software can foresee everything from election results to our next bad mood. Looking Glass is essentially that anxiety, but on steroids. It is the physical manifestation of our fear that somewhere, behind a curtain of top-secret clearance and expensive hardware, a group of people with unlimited budgets is using advanced physics to play God. It's a comforting conspiracy. In a twisted way, at least if the future is rigged, it's not our fault that everything feels a bit scripted. Nothing makes a conspiracy theory stick quite like a sprinkle of genuine-sounding technical jargon. The Looking Glass lore is a masterclass in pseudoscientific garnish. By throwing around terms like space-time distortion, quantum computing, and counter-rotating plasma physics, the legend gains a certain intellectual weight that your standard urban legend usually lacks. It's the same logic behind why we enjoy sci-fi. If you describe a magic wand in enough detail, mentioning its particle accelerator core and its hyperstable flux capacitor, it stops being magic and starts sounding like a project the Department of Energy might actually fund. It's a beautiful, confusing mess of syllables that makes you think, well, I don't exactly know what counter-rotating mercury plasma is, but it sounds expensive, so it's probably true. In short, if you run into the name Project Looking Glass, you're standing at a fork in the road of modern pop culture. You are either reading the plot summary of a story about secret government experiments gone horribly right, all wrong, or you've stumbled into a piece of internet folklore built on the desperate, hopeful, and slightly terrifying idea that someone, somewhere, has actually built a machine capable of seeing what comes next. And really, who could blame them for keeping it secret? If you had a machine that could show you the future, would you use it to solve world hunger? Or would you use it to see if they ever invent a better pizza topping? We all know the answer, and that perhaps is the real reason the government isn't letting us have a turn. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. If a machine like the legendary Looking Glass actually existed, would you want to know what tomorrow brings, or is ignorance bliss?